Today I'm doing something the government would prefer that I didn't. I'm going to flash the ECU on my Multistrada V4 to see if I can fix the fact that in the mid-range, this bike feels like a thoroughbred horse being forced to run a marathon while breathing through a damp cocktail straw. Now, normally this is where the YouTuber starts screaming about massive horsepower gains, but I'm gonna be honest, I really don't care about increasing the power. This bike already has more than enough. It has all the horsepowers. I mean, if I need more than what this thing already produces to get to Red Lodge by Thursday, I've made a serious error in my life choices. I'm doing this because I want a throttle that doesn't behave like a caffeinated toddler, especially at high RPMs and small throttle inputs. I want smooth, linear power delivery, but there's a second reason, and it sounds like a total contradiction. I want to see if I can fix the fuel economy. You see, the factory tune isn't necessarily designed for efficiency. It's designed for tailpipe chemistry to keep the catalytic converter hot and the bureaucrats happy. The ECU is constantly fighting itself. It leans the fuel out until the engine is gasping for air, which makes it run really hot, and then dumps gas back in to keep the pistons from melting. It's a frantic digital tug of war that leaves the bike drinking fuel like a thirsty sailor on shore leave for the very first time, just to satisfy a man with a decibel meter. Now, it sounds impossible, right? More mid-range, better throttle response, and better mileage. But I think if the engine isn't constantly fighting a restricted brick in the exhaust in a confused computer, it'll finally be able to do its job. So we're gonna test it, not with a dyno run, but we're gonna see if we can actually make the bike more efficient by making it a little less legal. I'm using my bike as the test subject, but honestly, what we're doing here should hold true for pretty much any bike. You see, the discrepancy between regions is the perfect proof of this struggle. You can go into a dealership in Europe and buy a Honda that makes a glorious 150, 180 horsepower, but when that same bike arrives on American soil, it's been put on a restricted diet that drops it down to like 130 horsepower. It's the same engine, the same pistons, the same valves, but the American version has been given the equivalent of a digital ball and chain. Our drive-by noise laws are particularly draconian, forcing manufacturers to literally kill the power in the middle of the rev range just to pass that test. That's why so many bike reviewers complain about a flat spot at 5,000 RPM. But to make matters even more complicated, bike manufacturers have to work with fuel standards from every region, and those standards are all different. Our fuel is measured differently and uses different additives than anybody else. That's why in America, a delicate Italian factory map sometimes just falls apart. So today, we're gonna be telling that nervous bureaucrat stuffed into our ECU to take a holiday. We're gonna remove the catalytic converter, which is basically a giant heavy brick of sadness stuck in the exhaust, and we're gonna remap the fueling to behave like a proper motorcycle again. So here it is, a VO Vince mid-pipe cat delete. And to go with it, I'm flashing the ECU with an up-map tune. Now, before you start thinking that this is one of those paid promo things, nope, this is not sponsored. Nobody's sending me parts or cutting me a check for this. I paid for it, which means if it's awesome, I'm gonna tell you it's awesome, and if it's garbage, well, I'll tell you that too, but we know it's not gonna be.
Now for the question that we all really wanna know the answer to, how much does the catalytic converter weigh? How much weight are we taking off?
8.3 kilos. What is that in freedom units? 18 pounds. Now, a few quick tips for when you're actually under the bike. First, wear gloves and keep your hands off bare metal. It's good to have a clean environment. Any oils or grease, even the natural oils from your skin, will stain the pipes the moment they heat up, effectively tattooing your fingerprints into the steel forever. Second, resist the urge to torque anything down early. Assemble the entire system loosely first. You want enough play in the pipes to wiggle everything into alignment, and only once the whole system is sitting exactly where it should do you go through and tighten it all down. All right, the mid pipe is on, and I gotta say, it looks way too good to be hiding under the bike like that. But as much as I wanna fire it up right now and rattle windows 3 towns over, we have some brain surgery to do first. Now, in the past, I've spent a small fortune on custom maps at a dyno, like there goes my tire budget kind of money. But this time, we're going with an up-map flash, which is way cheaper, and I love that we live in a world where we can do this, because if it works as well as everybody says it does, it's a game changer for backyard upgrades like this. So let's plug this thing in and see if we can teach the Multistrada some new tricks. The process of actually flashing the ECU was something I was a little bit intimidated by at first. You're essentially performing digital heart surgery on a very expensive Italian machine, and the fear of bricking the bike felt real. But in practice, the up-map system is remarkably straightforward. You plug it into the diagnostic port under the seat. The app handles the handshake. The most frustrating part, honestly, was the e-commerce side of the app. You get one free map with the device, and finding the exact one for your specific exhaust was easy enough. But then navigating the voucher code system to actually buy it for $0 was easily the most confusing step. Once the map is actually in your library, the rest is intuitive, as long as you don't treat the instructions like a terms and conditions page and actually read every word before clicking next. The app walks you through the ignition cycles and the battery checks without any drama. All right, new lungs, new brain. Let's see if she remembers how to breathe. I think it's time to fire her up. All right, so this is the part where I have to be the adult in the room for a minute and talk about the legal reality of what we've just done. This motorcycle is, legally speaking, no longer a street bike. In the eyes of the law, this is now a closed course competition vehicle. The EPA and the Clean Air Act are very clear, but legal disclaimers aside, I need to tell you a little bit about what this bike is like now, because frankly, it's a little bit of a revelation. As I said at the start, I was not at all concerned with finding more power. The Multistrada V4 Pikes Peak already has enough grunt to rearrange your internal organs. What I wanted was a motorcycle that didn't feel like it was fighting me. Before this map, navigating traffic at low speed was like being stuck in a car with a geriatric uncle who can't decide which pedal was which. It was just this constant, jerky, unprovoked lunging. With the up-map and the Leo Vince mid-pipe, the fueling is, and I don't use this word lightly, it's perfect. Across every single map, the jerkiness is gone. The low-speed surging has evaporated, and we can ignore the peak horsepower numbers that I don't actually have anyway, and you only see them for a split second at redline. The real-world difference is in the delivery. The torque curve has essentially been filled in right in the meat of the rev range, between 4,000 and 8,000 RPM. Before, there was this weird mid-range sag where the bike felt like it was holding its breath, right? It was just really snatchy. Now at any throttle position, it just pulls with a clean, relentless surge. And then there's the sound. It is, in a word, glorious. I generally do not like loud pipes. Without the cat, the bike is decidedly louder. But here's the reality. I ride with earplugs, and at almost all speeds from the inside of the helmet, I can barely tell a difference during normal cruising. But when you get into the top third of the rev range, it sings. It has this spectacular magical tone that only a V4 can produce. I do wish it was not quite so loud, and I think it's a shame that Leo Vince does not offer a dB killer or some additional muffling for this mid-pipe, or even a smaller cat, although I can't even imagine how expensive that would be. But that V4 howl is a hell of a consolation prize. Now finally, there is the fuel economy. This is the part that still blows my mind. Before this map, I was lucky if I could squeeze 100 miles out of a tank before the fuel light started screaming at me. It was abysmal. Now I'm consistently getting well over 140 miles before that light comes on, and that's a massive jump in efficiency just by letting the engine run the way it was designed to run. The only exception was the track. In the full race mode, I was draining the tank in about 60 to 80 miles. Yeesh, right? I have to be honest, I am struggling with the math on this next bit. We are caught in this weird moral tug of war. On one hand, the bike is burning about 15% less fuel. From one standpoint, that's objectively better. But on the other hand, a Euro 5 bike is only allowed to emit barely any hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides. By removing the cat, I'm likely emitting somewhere between 3 to 5 times that amount. All right, so what does that math actually look like? This bike only sees around 2,500 miles per year. The added economy reduces CO2 from around 1,300 pounds per year to around 950 or so. I should have stopped there, but I kept doing math. Before removing the cat, it would have put out roughly 650 grams of pollutants, about 1.5 pounds. But now with the cat delete, that's going to increase to around 2,500 grams, over 5 pounds. Making the comparison with a modern car, 2,500 miles is roughly 10 times more than a modern Honda Civic or Toyota Camry produces in 11,000 miles. That's the equivalent to the tailpipe pollution of a 60s muscle car. Whether that's a trade-off worth making is a personal choice, but like anything else we do on two wheels, the goal should be to understand the data so we can make an informed decision for ourselves. So I'm not going to pretend that burning less gas makes this a green machine, going from 1 pound to 5 pounds of pollutants. It's just the reality of the trade-off I made to get a functional motorcycle. And I don't know if that's a valid justification or just a way to sleep at night. This was an expensive upgrade. Between the mid-pipe and the up-map, it's not an insignificant investment, but it has transformed the experience. We took a world-class machine that was being strangled by red tape and gave it its soul back. It now performs the way I expected it to when I first signed the papers. It now performs the way a MotoGP-inspired Ducati V4 should. Unequivocally, it has made the riding experience more visceral and more joyful. I can't deny it. The bike is less of a collection of compromises, and it's a lot closer to being a bit of a masterpiece. So I can only do projects like this because of your support. A huge thank you to our channel members and our Patreon community for keeping this channel alive. To everyone who watches, likes, comments, and shares these videos, thank you so much for making this possible. Ride on and ride well.